So we've talked about this before on the show. It's an amazing curriculum that our young people can get in driving schools. Lieutenant James Jefferson with Noble and Trooper Christian Reed with the Louisiana State Police are here to talk about the Youth Driving Initiative out of the Law and Your Community curriculum by Noble, the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives. And you guys have been doing this now for a little while. It's in partnership with the Law Enforcement and Criminal Justice Foundation. This is so great. So when kids go to get their driver's license, learning how to get behind the wheel for the first time, you and colleague law enforcement officers go into the driving schools and talk with them about interaction during a traffic stop, and you give them some things to remember when they're behind the wheel if they get pulled over.
Yes, sir. So as you said, the Law in Your Community program is a nationally recognized hands-on training program designed for young people 13 to 18 to help increase communication and understand their rights. But to your point, we really focus on traffic stops. We know that more Americans will come into contact with police through a traffic stop than any other call for service. And so we think it's important to go in and have these trainings to not only educate the kids, but to replicate that and for us to hear from our young people on what they would like to see in this profession moving forward as well. So it's a give and take, but the ultimate goal is to ensure that not only the police officers go home safe, but everybody that they come in contact with, including these young
people in the car.
Go home
and
safe.
State Police supports this program, this curriculum, and as do agencies across the state. But talk about why it's important for LSP to support this.
Well, Clay, you know, each and every day we have young drivers that are on the road, and they're faced with a lot of adversity behind the wheel, and we want them to be comfortable. We want them to be familiar with the trooper stops them and understanding that we have a protocol to follow and to normalize that. You know, so we're going to address behaviors, we're going to address the reasons why we're stopping them, and we're going to come and contact them. But you know, ultimately our goal is to provide public safety. So we're there because we are part of the community, and we're trying to encourage them to practice safe behaviors.
Yeah, you know, look, there is a national conversation going on right now in lieu of what happened to Tyree Nichols in Georgia, right? And people talk about this because what we saw in the video was egregious behavior that doesn't represent the 98, 99% of law enforcement officers who put on a badge every day, but the behavior is unacceptable. In your class, is there anything you say to make a young, because I'll give you an example, and some of the tips here, Scott, if we could put those up on the screen. 1 in 10. Remember that every officer is not, quote, out to get you. And then number 10, to report police misconduct, call your local police department. In other words, don't try to settle it in the car on the side of the road. So can you speak to that a little bit?
So that you're right. One of the things that we drive home is that you don't hold court on side the road. Right. That's not the time to get into any altercations and or verbal disputes at that present moment. There's procedures in place for that. But conversely, we also talk about if you are mistreated and or have an issue with the way that the police officer carried himself, we encourage them to call that department and file a complaint with their internal affairs. Right? We know that 99.9% does it the right way. Sure. But perhaps if you come in contact with one of that 1% or 0.% that doesn't, we have to give them avenues to report that officer. Right. And again, nothing upsets us more than a bad officer, so we want to see that reported.
Look, I know I've talked to so many of y'all over the years, and y'all are sometimes at the front lines of anger when someone violates the oath of what you guys do for a living with behavior that is unbecoming toward your profession. You know, these kinds of incidents, though, do create a sense of distance with kids. Do you find that when you're able to interact with them in these classes that you could break down some of those barriers?
So that's our very intent, is to try to break down those barriers and let them know that we are here to provide a public safety, do it the right way. We're part of the community, right? We live in this community with these kids. We go to the same grocery store, same gas stations, visit the same shopping centers. Right. And so it's important for them to know that we are part of the community and we have to do this together as a team to overcome that stigma that you spoke of.
And then Christian, you guys have people, I've witnessed one of the classes, you guys have people who are in there talking, interacting. They do a skit where the officers get behind the wheel and play the part of the kids. From your standpoint, what's the value?
Well, there's a tremendous amount of value anytime we're in a room where they're becoming familiar with our practices and hey, how to conduct themselves in the event of a traffic stop. And look, a young driver being stopped by a trooper, they're nervous, you know, and we have to stress the importance of, hey, we're going to acknowledge why we stop you. We're going to have a conversation. And educate them. That's the biggest thing in education. And you're talking about these barriers, so we have to educate and give them an opportunity to voice their concerns, you know, and that's what the meaningful part of being involved in this initiative.
The law in your community. Look, you can find out more about this. The Youth Driving Initiative right now is at Stop and Go Academy. We'll get them back. They got something coming up in April, right?
Yes, sir.
All right. Back to talk about 225 Gives in just a moment. Excellent.